Nathan never imagined that fate would lead him to uncover such an unexpected family secret. When he found himself facing a choice that could save Ethan's life, the boy who reminded him so much of his son Lucas, a shocking revelation would shake the very foundations of everything he knew. What he didn't realize was that this decision would not only put him at mortal risk but also unveil a genetic connection that would change his life forever. Get ready for what's to come, because this story isn't just about overcoming, it's about life and death intertwined by a long-held secret. Nathan woke up every morning with the weight of guilt on his shoulders. The sound of the alarm clock seemed more distant each day, a faint presence amid the emptiness of his home. He never imagined he would feel like this, trapped in an endless cycle of pain where the hours passed, and he wasn't sure what still drove him to get out of bed. His house, once filled with laughter and joy, was now immersed in a dense silence, broken only by the sounds of his carpenter's tools. But the sound that echoed most in his mind wasn't the wood being cut or nails being hammered, it was the sound of memories of Lucas, his son, who now was nothing more than an absence, a presence that seemed to materialize in every corner of that house. Lucas had a rare disease, a genetic condition that had imprisoned him in his own body. Even though the doctors said the chances of a cure were minimal, Nathan refused to believe it. Each diagnosis that came, each treatment that proved ineffective, plunged him deeper into despair. He didn't know how to handle the fear that consumed his heart, the fear of losing his son, the only reason he still tried to keep going. But time, relentless and merciless, showed no pity, and Lucas's disease seemed like an invincible enemy. With each passing day, Nathan watched his son wither, lose strength, and the pain of witnessing his suffering only grew. Lucas's tears, his soft complaints about the pain, mirrored what Nathan also felt but couldn't show. He told himself he was a strong man, a former soldier, but the battle he was fighting now wasn't with weapons or fellow soldiers, it was with the fragility of life. And despite all his efforts, he couldn't prevent the worst. Lucas's death came like a shadow that silently enveloped them, vast and overwhelming. There were no screams, no goodbyes. Lucas simply slipped away, and with him, a part of Nathan was lost too. The void left behind was deeper than any pain he had ever known. Now, in his silent house, without Lucas's laughter, he found himself adrift, unsure of how to move forward. After Lucas's death, Nathan succumbed to isolation. There were no longer any reasons to leave the house, to fight, or to try to save anything. He became a shadow of himself, drowning in his pain and the weight of guilt. Life seemed to have abandoned him, and the fear of a meaningless future consumed him every day. He had lost the reason to fight, and the hours dragged on as if time were mocking him. What was left for him? The pain of a lost love, the loneliness of an empty home, and the hopelessness of a father who couldn't save the child he loved most. The silent battle he had waged against the disease and ultimately lost was now replaced by an even harder struggle, the fight against abandonment and the fear of living without purpose. The house, once a home, had become a prison. He spent his days working in carpentry, but what had once fulfilled him now made no sense at all. Every board he cut, every piece of furniture he finished, was merely a reflection of what he was trying to hide. He threw himself into work, hoping that physical exhaustion would make the emotional burden disappear, but the truth was he could barely stand. The guilt of not having done enough to save Lucas was a constant shadow that followed him. He wondered if things would have been different if he had done something more. But deep down, he knew the answer was always the same. There was nothing more that could have been done. And so it was, without warning or plans, that Nathan found himself at a breaking point. His life no longer made sense, and he didn't know what to expect from existence anymore. He had lost everything: his wife, his son, his confidence. The fear of living a hollow, purposeless life consumed him, and he didn't know how to deal with it. But fate, as always, had its own way of pulling us back to life. Nathan didn't know it yet, but something, or someone, was about to appear and change the course of his story. He was on the edge of the abyss, but the hand of fate was reaching out, ready to show him that there was still hope. Nathan didn't know what had led him to that deserted road. He was simply running from the pain, trying to escape a void that seemed endless. The headlights of his car lit up the road, wet from the heavy rain, while the sound of raindrops striking the windshield heightened his sense of loneliness. When the car suddenly stopped in the middle of nowhere, he looked around and saw only darkness and the storm. Fear gripped his chest, but something inside told him he had to keep going. As a man who had never asked for help, he now found himself in a place where he was powerless, at the mercy of nature and his own pain. That's when he saw the light of a house in the distance. With little choice, Nathan made his way toward the light, eventually arriving at the door of a simple farmhouse, where an elderly woman greeted him with a warm smile. Olivia Carter, with her serene demeanor and attentive gaze, offered him shelter without questioning or asking for explanations. For Nathan, it was the first sign that something could change. Yet, despite her offer, mistrust still consumed him. He wasn't used to being helped, and the idea of accepting the hospitality of a stranger challenged his resolve. He wondered, was this a sign of weakness or the chance he so desperately needed? The storm outside intensified, but inside the house, the warmth of a fireplace and Olivia's kindness provided a kind of comfort Nathan had forgotten existed. During the simple meal she prepared for him, she didn't ask many questions, observing him with quiet patience. He, in turn, was restless, uncomfortable, and unable to cope with this act of kindness. He had never known how to receive affection, always believing he had to be the provider, the strong one, the man who would never need anyone's help. But there, in that house, he felt, for the first time in a long while, seen. Olivia, unhurried, offered words that Nathan didn't know how to respond to. They weren't words of pity but of understanding. It was as if she could see his pain without judging him. To Nathan, it felt like a distant dream. How could someone be so generous without expecting anything in return? But more than that, he felt something different, something he hadn't experienced in ages. It wasn't just a helping hand, it was the possibility of a fresh start, something that both terrified and intrigued him. He wondered if it was even possible to move on from his pain. He had grown so accustomed to loneliness and the feeling of abandonment that accepting this offer seemed almost like an act of betrayal to Lucas's memory. The elderly woman, with her keen gaze, saw Nathan's inner turmoil and calmly offered a solution. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said. "I can't erase what happened, but I can give you a place to find your own peace." There was no rush, no demands. In that moment, Olivia offered him exactly what he needed most. A refuge, a place where he could simply breathe and maybe, just maybe, start rebuilding what pain had destroyed. Olivia's kindness was like a silent embrace, comforting yet challenging, as if she were saying, "You can allow yourself to live again." Nathan hesitated, but the weight of doubt and fear began to dissolve, little by little. He still didn't know what he would do with his life or what would come next, but something within him began to shift. He, who had always felt abandoned by life, now found himself presented with an opportunity he couldn't ignore. The pain wouldn't vanish overnight, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could begin to heal. The fear of being welcomed, of opening himself up again, was still there, but he knew that something deep inside, a small, almost imperceptible part of him, was starting to feel a glimmer of hope. Olivia offered him work on the farm, not just any work, but something he could do with his hands, something he excelled at: carpentry. And so he accepted. He had nothing left to lose, and maybe this was the first step toward something greater. The rain outside continued unabated, but somehow, inside he felt a faint breeze. And that faint breeze, almost imperceptible, began to show him that even after pain, life could hold new possibilities. But was he ready to accept them? Even as Nathan settled into Olivia's small farmhouse, the sense of loss and fear lingered like persistent shadows. Every step he took toward starting anew was an internal battle, and the fear seemed to intensify as he inched closer to a second chance. Deep down, he knew he was running from something bigger, something he feared he couldn't face. Ethan, Olivia's grandson, began to stir a mix of conflicting emotions within Nathan. The boy, so full of life and energy, with his bright eyes brimming with hope, reminded him of Lucas. And that left him shaken. The illness Ethan faced was not unfamiliar to Nathan. Fear crept into his chest like a sharp blade, cutting through any attempt to rationalize what he felt. Watching the boy's suffering, so similar to his son's, was like reliving the past. He was afraid to get involved, afraid to start caring again, fearing that the pain of potential failure would destroy him once more. Every glance at Ethan reminded him of what he had lost, and that reminder was unbearable. He didn't want to grow attached again, didn't want to feel what he had felt when he lost Lucas. The pain of losing a child was a wound that would never heal, and Nathan knew that if he allowed himself to love again, it would be like reopening that wound, exposing it to the world. Yet, at the same time, there was something within him that he couldn't deny. The care, the small gestures from Ethan, the way the boy looked at him with blind hope. It made Nathan uncomfortable as he tried to flee from the responsibility of helping him. There was no denying that he felt a connection to the boy, something beyond fear. Perhaps it was a fatherly instinct, or maybe it was something deeper, something he couldn't quite grasp. But he didn't know how to deal with it. How could he trust the process of life again when the pain of loss had shaped him so deeply? How could he help Ethan without it feeling like a repetition of his own personal tragedy? Olivia noticed Nathan's internal struggle, but she knew she couldn't force him to make any decisions. One day, while they were together, she invited him for a walk around the farm, unhurried, without any expectations. As they strolled through the property, under an open sky and a gentle breeze, Olivia, with her quiet wisdom, said something Nathan would never forget. Sometimes it's not about forgetting, Nathan. It's not about erasing the past. It's about understanding that by helping another, you may find something within yourself that you haven't yet seen. Those words struck him like lightning. Even so, he didn't know if he was ready to take that step. The fear of losing again, of reliving the pain of watching someone he loved fade away, paralyzed him. When he looked at Olivia, he saw the patience in her eyes. There was no rush, no judgment. Olivia wasn't expecting him to make a decision right then and there. She had welcomed him without pressure and was willing to wait for him to take control of his own story. But for Nathan, that seemed impossible. How could he trust himself again after everything that had happened? He didn't know how to handle this new call from life. The fear of opening his heart to Ethan, only to possibly lose him, terrified him more than anything else. Olivia, like a patient mother, never insisted, but her gestures were enough to show Nathan that he wasn't alone. Even when he felt he no longer had the strength to move forward, she was there, silent but ready to help him walk at his own pace. But the path was winding, and Nathan knew he needed to face his own demons before he could take any step forward. He wondered if he was ready to confront his fear, to take the risk again, to trust, even knowing that pain could be just around the corner. And so, the days passed, and Nathan found himself on the verge of a decision he didn't want to make but that seemed inevitable. Refusing the call was becoming increasingly unsustainable, but at the same time he was consumed by uncertainty. Nathan's inner battle was far from over, and he still didn't know how the story would unfold. But one thing he knew, the fear of reliving the pain kept him distant, and he wondered if he would ever find the courage to take the next step. The answer was still unclear. What Nathan didn't yet realize was that by allowing himself to feel again, he might find the key to his own healing. Olivia, with her unwavering calm, became a silent and steady presence in Nathan's life. She didn't force her presence on him, but somehow, her wisdom seemed to permeate every corner of the farm, and slowly, Nathan's mind as well. She understood that what Nathan needed most wasn't advice but someone who would simply listen, who would be there without rushing to change the course of his pain. She knew that sometimes the best way to heal was just to be present, without judgment, offering only a kind gaze and a gentle touch of support. Olivia rarely spoke of her own story, but through small gestures, Nathan began to see that she carried her own weight, her own pain. Yet, unlike him, she didn't allow it to consume her. She possessed a serene strength that seemed to come from a profound understanding of life. Occasionally, she would share stories from her youth about how she had dedicated her life to medicine, helping families and children with special needs, and how, after retiring, she devoted herself to this farm, seeking to give what the world hadn't given her. But the stories weren't about her. They were about what she could teach without words, the art of welcoming others without expecting anything in return. Ethan, Olivia's grandson, was the second silent gift life had offered Nathan. At first, the boy seemed like a reflection of Lucas, a painful reminder of what he had lost. Ethan was full of energy, always smiling, but his eyes often carried a weight that didn't match his age. And that gaze awakened something in Nathan that he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of care, something buried deep within his heart, locked away with the pain of losing Lucas. As the days passed and Nathan became more immersed in the farm's routine, he began to notice something else. Ethan wasn't just a sick boy fighting his own battle. He was also someone who brought something precious to Nathan, the chance to reconnect with the humanity he thought he had lost. Nathan started to realize that his fatherly instincts, the same ones he had relied on with Lucas, could be useful once again. But the fear remained, lingering at the door of his heart, hesitant to take any step toward this new bond. How could he open himself up to this boy, knowing the risk of yet another loss? The memory of Lucas haunted him, making the process of connecting with Ethan painfully difficult. It was then that Olivia, with the insight of someone who deeply understood the human heart, had a conversation with Nathan that he would never forget. They were sitting on the porch, a cup of warm tea in their hands. Olivia didn't speak directly about Ethan but about Nathan himself. "You carry a deep pain, Nathan. A pain that seems endless. But don't let it imprison you. Love is never a burden. It doesn't weigh you down, it doesn't tire you. It sets you free." Her words felt like a beacon cutting through the darkness. For Nathan, it was more than just advice. It was a key, a way to see the world and his pain from a new perspective. Olivia said no more, but her words lingered in the air, waiting to be understood. For Nathan, that moment was like a quiet awakening. He didn't know if he was ready, but for the first time in a long while, he felt capable of trying. He realized that pain didn't need to dominate him, that he could love without losing himself, and that there was still something good to discover, even in the midst of suffering. Deep down, he knew he had to take the step, but fear still held him back. Olivia, with her steady and quiet presence, became the lighthouse Nathan never knew he needed. She taught him, without haste or pressure, the importance of taking one step at a time. She never forced anything, never tried to change him abruptly. She understood that he needed to find his own path, at his own pace, but she never let him forget that, no matter how hard it was, there was still beauty in the world and still a reason to keep going. And Ethan, with his infectious smile and youthful energy, was a reminder that love, even in the most challenging circumstances, could bloom. Nathan still didn't know what to do with all of this, but just having someone by his side, without rushing him, without demanding anything, was already a significant step. He realized that maybe, just maybe, he had the strength to try again, to help Ethan, to open himself up, and perhaps even to heal. But above all, he began to understand that what he truly needed wasn't to fight against the pain but to learn how to live with it in a way that no longer imprisoned him. One warm summer afternoon, as a gentle breeze swayed the leaves on the farm's trees, Nathan felt something shift inside him. Ethan was weaker that day, his face pale and his eyes duller than usual. The boy's illness was progressing and Nathan, though his heart still ached from the loss of Lucas, felt an unusual impulse. Something within him, something stronger than fear, drove him to approach Ethan, ready to help him in ways he hadn't been able to with his own son. That was the moment he realized. He was already involved, already pouring a part of himself into caring for the boy. And despite the fear that came with it, he knew he couldn't turn back. Ethan's crisis came suddenly and severely. Olivia, always vigilant, didn't hesitate to call for help. Nathan, feeling as inadequate as ever, stepped forward. The knowledge he had gained while caring for Lucas, scarce and frustrating as it had been, now seemed like the key to saving Ethan. The fear of failure, of losing another child, still loomed, threatening to overwhelm him. But Nathan was determined. He knew what needed to be done. The pain of seeing the boy fighting for his life, so young, so full of potential, awakened a kind of strength within him that he thought had been lost. With every step Nathan took, attending to the medical care Olivia had requested, he felt the weight of every decision. The fear remained, pushing him away from everything he loved, but in that moment he chose to act. Nathan didn't know if he was doing it right, but when he looked into Ethan's eyes, something guided him. He thought of Lucas, of how his son had fought until the very end, and how he had wished for more time. That thought motivated him, driving him forward. He didn't want to fail again, but somehow, in trying to save Ethan, he felt he was finally doing something to ease his own pain. By the end of that day, as Ethan rested, still very weak but alive, Nathan sat at the boy's bedside, exhausted. He knew the battle was far from over, but there was something about Ethan's weary smile that made him feel he was on the right path. For the first time, he felt there was something he could do to make amends, in some way, for what he had lost with Lucas. The guilt still consumed him, but now there was a faint light, a thread of hope beginning to flicker in his chest. He knew he wasn't alone at that moment, and the experience of caring for Ethan was helping him rebuild himself. Olivia, seeing Nathan's efforts, approached him with a look full of understanding. She didn't say a word, but the touch of her hand on his shoulders spoke volumes. She understood that this involvement, this care, was Nathan's way of healing, of finding something to dedicate himself to beyond pain and loss. He was beginning to realize that, despite everything he had endured, he still had something to offer others. He was starting to see that love didn't end with Lucas's death. There was still something left within him to give, and that realization gave him a new sense of purpose. Despite the fear and pain that still accompanied him, something was shifting inside Nathan. He was learning, through sheer necessity, that perhaps the greatest gift he could give himself was this: the ability to care, to show compassion, to embrace the chance to make a difference in someone else's life. The journey was far from easy, but he had taken the first step, and that was enough to make him feel, for the first time in years, a little lighter. The fight wasn't over, but he already knew that no matter how much fear continued to haunt him, he was no longer alone. As the sun set on the horizon, Nathan felt a mix of emotions he no longer knew how to name. Fear, yes, that was still there. But there was something else, something that made him believe that, despite everything, there was still room for a new beginning. Ethan, so small and vulnerable, was becoming a reflection of Nathan's own journey. And somehow, in helping Ethan, Nathan was also helping himself, recovering parts of himself he thought were lost forever. Each passing day made Nathan's fear feel more tangible. Ethan's illness was worsening, and with every crisis the boy faced, memories of Lucas resurfaced like uncontrollable ghosts. Nathan knew all too well what it was to watch someone he loved suffer. Seeing Ethan fight for his life brought back every moment of helplessness he had experienced during his son's battle with his illness. The fear of losing someone he was beginning to love again was palpable, making every action a fight against pain and despair. Yet what drove him now wasn't just the fear of loss. It was the love he was beginning to feel for Ethan. A love that, though painful, compelled him to keep going, to do whatever he could to help. Olivia and Dr. Harper became his greatest allies in this process. While Olivia provided emotional support, ensuring Nathan didn't drown in his own sorrow, Dr. Harper offered his medical expertise, guiding him through the daily challenges of Ethan's condition. But the challenges were immense. Each new medical crisis tested not only Nathan's abilities but also his emotional resilience. The fear of failing, of not being able to save the boy, consumed him more and more. He spent sleepless nights watching over Ethan, wrestling with the solitude of his own fear, doing everything in his power to avoid the sense that he was reliving the same tragedy. Gradually, Nathan began to realize how deeply his own healing process was intertwined with Ethan's. He was no longer just helping a boy who reminded him of his lost son. Ethan had become someone real, with his own fears and hopes, and Nathan felt a growing bond with him, something stronger than any shadow from the past. However, this connection came at a cost. The more he got involved, the more he feared that another loss might destroy him. He knew that if he allowed himself to fully embrace this love, the risk of being consumed by grief again would be enormous. What he didn't realize was that by caring for Ethan, he was, in a way, also caring for himself. But it wasn't just the medical challenges that tested them. Nathan's past, with its old wounds, began to resurface intensely. The nights when he relived moments with Lucas, the memories of pain and loss, weighed heavily on his chest. The fear of failing again, of watching another loved one slip away, consumed him. It was as if he was being tested at every turn, challenged to face his deepest fears. Even with Olivia and Dr. Harper by his side, there were moments when he felt utterly lost, unsure if he could continue. Yet, even when the challenges felt insurmountable, there were moments of relief, small signs that perhaps, just perhaps, Ethan was beginning to improve. It was as if every smile, every deeper breath the boy took, was a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. These moments of hope were what Nathan clung to, even on the darkest days. He knew the fight wasn't over, but when he looked at Ethan, he felt he was doing the right thing, that he was finally rediscovering his purpose. Each of Ethan's crises, each small step forward, each obstacle overcome, became proof that Nathan's path was being gradually shaped. He was beginning to understand that while fear and pain were immense, he also had within him a strength he had forgotten existed. This healing process wouldn't be easy, but somehow, Nathan was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to begin again. The journey was far from over, but with each new challenge, Nathan began to see that he wasn't as alone in this fight as he had once thought. As he looked at Ethan, who was sleeping peacefully after yet another crisis had passed, Nathan felt something different. He didn't know what the future held, but something in his heart told him he still had much to give. And perhaps, by helping Ethan overcome his battles, he was, in some way, overcoming his own. Nathan was starting to grasp the depth of what was happening within him, even as the fear of losing Ethan lingered, making him question his own intentions. The boy was finally stable, but the doctors couldn't promise lasting improvement. They spoke of the urgent need for a bone marrow transplant, but the chances of finding a compatible donor seemed slim, almost impossible. And it was at this point, when the anguish became unbearable, that Olivia revealed a shocking possibility to Nathan. He didn't know how to process what she told him. He and Ethan shared a rare genetic compatibility, which meant that Nathan, unknowingly, could be the key to saving the boy's life. The revelation left Nathan frozen. How was he supposed to respond to this information? The sacrifice of donating his bone marrow felt like a decision that could only be made with unshakable courage. And though he felt indebted to Ethan, a visceral fear gripped him. Fear of the pain from the procedure, fear of not surviving, fear of losing what little remained of his own life. But the deepest fear, the one he tried to hide, was the fear of failing to save the boy, of once again being unable to prevent loss, just as he had failed to save Lucas. How could he risk his life again when the scars of his previous loss were still so raw? Olivia, always attuned to Nathan's emotions, saw the conflict in his eyes. She knew this decision couldn't be forced. But she also knew that deep down, Nathan wasn't the kind of man to back away from such a monumental challenge, especially when Ethan's life was at stake. You have a big heart, Nathan. If you choose to do this, it will be the bravest thing you've ever done. And, in a way, it will also be a way to honor the love you still carry, even after losing Lucas. Her words reverberated in his mind. He knew Olivia wasn't trying to pressure him, but she was making it clear how much Ethan's life, and Nathan's own emotional recovery, depended on this act. The moment of decision came quickly. Nathan stood at the edge of an abyss, the weight of the choice pressing heavily on his shoulders. He felt the pain of losing Lucas in every step he took, and yet, he also knew his life still had something to offer, something he hadn't yet fully explored. Donating his bone marrow wasn't just a chance to save Ethan. It was, in some way, an opportunity to rewrite his story. He realized that by making this choice, he was doing something for someone else, for the first time in a long while, that wasn't defined by the pain of loss but by the hope of life. The procedure, looming like a silent monster, carried with it a strange sense of peace. Nathan looked at Ethan with profound love, and for the first time since Lucas's death, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. The pain of losing Lucas was still there, but now he understood that sacrifice wasn't something that would destroy him. On the contrary, it could be the beginning of something new. By choosing to give of himself for Ethan, Nathan was, in a way, finding himself again. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but as he looked at the boy, his heart told him it would be worth it. He was ready to face the hidden cave of pain and doubt because, deep down, he felt he was preparing for something greater than he could fully comprehend. The fear was still present, but courage was beginning to take its place. Nathan was preparing to cross the threshold, knowing that his sacrifice might not guarantee a happy ending, but he was willing to try. The memory of Lucas, which had once suffocated him, now seemed to guide him in a different way. Perhaps, in the end, the key to true healing was indeed found in the sacrifice for someone he loved. He didn't know if he was ready to face the consequences, but he knew that if he didn't try, he would live with the pain of doubt forever. Olivia and Dr. Harper stood by his side, ready to support him, but Nathan understood that, ultimately, the decision was his alone. He looked at Ethan, now even weaker but with a faint smile, and for the first time in years, the fear that had been his constant companion began to relent slightly. He knew that by doing this, he was breaking the chains of fear and guilt that had bound him, and perhaps, just perhaps, something great could emerge from the darkness. The transplant was carried out with impeccable precision, but Nathan's recovery did not go as everyone had hoped. Complications crept in silently and cruelly, like a shadow hiding in the dark. An unexpected infection led Nathan into a deep coma, and the fear of losing yet another loved one cast a heavy silence over the farm. Olivia, who had always known how to be strong, now faced an emotional battle for which she was unprepared. She knew the procedure had been a chance to save Ethan, but seeing Nathan, the resilient, determined man, fighting for his life made her question everything. She felt an immense fear, a sense of helplessness she had never experienced before. Ethan, though still weak, was recovering quickly thanks to Nathan's sacrifice. But seeing the man he now called Uncle Nathan, lying unconscious filled him with anguish. It felt as if something precious was being taken from everyone there, and the weight of the situation was unbearable for the boy. The fear of losing Nathan, after everything he had done for him, gripped Ethan's heart. He couldn't imagine his life without that quiet, protective presence. Each passing minute felt like an eternity as he waited for news of Nathan's recovery, though deep inside, he feared it might not be enough. Olivia, despite her experience with loss and resilience, felt utterly lost in that moment. The fear of Nathan's death clung to her, like an invisible force trying to take hold of everything. She spent her days by Nathan's side, holding his hand and whispering words of hope, but inside, she felt a profound emptiness. Even with Ethan's recovery, even with the small victories that seemed to appear every day, the fear of losing Nathan was stronger than anything else. The sense of powerlessness became an unbearable weight, and she knew there was nothing she could do to control what was happening. The silence on the farm was oppressive, as if the entire world had stopped, waiting for a decision no one could make. The days dragged on, and while Nathan fought for his life, his mind seemed to drift to a distant place, a limbo where pain and hope intertwined in an eternal embrace. He didn't know if he was alive or dead, if he had fulfilled his mission, or if there was still more for him to do. But one thing was clear: the fear of being lost forever, the fear that his sacrifice might have been meaningless, followed him even in his unconscious state. While Nathan remained in that liminal space, Ethan, with his gradual recovery, began to understand something profound about life and death. The boy, with his quiet strength, was undergoing an experience that, though cruel, was transforming him. He felt that, somehow, his recovery was not just for himself but also for Nathan. He was beginning to realize that lives so deeply intertwined, like those of a father and son, or an uncle and nephew, did not always follow the logic of time. Sometimes, sacrifices had to be made to save another, even without fully understanding the purpose. But Nathan's limbo didn't last forever. The silent battle he waged, unaware of what was happening around him, was nearing its end. The fear that had always accompanied him was beginning to give way to the power of love, a love expressed in Olivia's every gesture, in every whispered word from Ethan, in every memory of Lucas that still lived within him. Nathan didn't know it, but his struggle was creating something greater than he could have imagined. He was about to emerge from the limbo of death, reborn, and with him, the hope that his sacrifice would never be in vain. When Nathan awoke, it wasn't a simple return to reality. It felt like surfacing from a deep sleep, an abyss where echoes of his life mingled with memories of Lucas, shadows of his pain, and fragments of his hope. As his eyes opened, the first face he saw was Olivia's, her eyes glistening with relief but carrying an expression of deep longing. She had stayed by his side the entire time, holding on, waiting for a miracle. And in that moment, Nathan realized that, in a way, he had become that miracle. He, who had fought so hard against fear and loss, was now here, alive, with a new purpose awaiting him. Recovery was gradual, but Nathan's transformation was faster than he could have imagined. Every step he took toward physical healing was also a step toward emotional rebirth. The fear that had been his constant companion now felt like a distant shadow. He felt different, as if he had emerged from pain reshaped into someone new. The relief of knowing Ethan was safe and recovering quickly was an immeasurable reward, but Nathan sensed there was more, something greater waiting on the horizon. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he knew this second chance, this miracle, wasn't something he could let slip away. When Ethan saw Nathan awake, he ran to his side with a spontaneous joy that touched Nathan's heart in ways he hadn't thought possible. The boy, who had started as a painful reminder of his own son, had become the embodiment of new hope. So full of life, so brimming with renewed energy, Ethan was proof that every sacrifice had been worth it. The gratitude Nathan felt for Ethan was immense, and as he saw the boy's smile, he realized that by choosing to donate his bone marrow, he had done more than save a life. He had reconnected with the essence of life itself, something he thought he had lost forever. More than Ethan's recovery or the fact that he was once again standing as a man, what truly moved Nathan was what he felt inside. He had endured so many battles, so many defeats, but now he understood that life still held something more for him, something beyond words. The sacrifice of his bone marrow, the pain of the procedure, the struggle for Ethan's well-being, all of it had transformed into a sense of completeness. The pain of Lucas's loss, the anguish of abandonment, now felt like distant echoes of something he had overcome. He was no longer the man trapped by fear. He was someone who, by saving another, had allowed himself to be saved. Olivia, witnessing Nathan's transformation, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She knew he had undergone not just a physical journey of sacrifice but an emotional one as well. He had reconnected with his humanity, with the love he thought he had lost, and was now living a second chance, not just for himself but for everyone around him. She watched with quiet tenderness, knowing that in this moment, they were not merely survivors. They were alive, with renewed purpose and a future that once seemed impossible. Nathan's reward was not just in his physical recovery but in the profound transformation he had undergone. The pain that once felt like a prison was now a reminder of his strength. He knew that, no matter what the future held, he had the ability to live with courage and love. He had conquered his greatest enemy, the fear of living again. And that, in itself, was his greatest victory. Nathan's transformation wasn't immediate. After his awakening and recovery, what awaited him wasn't a tranquil life but a path of reintegration and reconciliation with everything he had lost. The farm, now a renewed home, became the backdrop for a new journey where every small act, every conversation, every moment with Olivia and Ethan was an opportunity to rebuild his life. Nathan realized that while his physical recovery was underway, the true rebuilding needed to come from within. He wasn't just returning to life, he was creating a new one that, for the first time in years, felt purposeful. Ethan, with his constant smile and infectious energy, became the beacon lighting Nathan's path. The boy, so young yet so wise from the lessons life had forced upon him, seemed to be the reason Nathan was breathing again. Nathan began to understand that their journey, though marked by loss and sacrifice, was also filled with possibilities. He still felt the weight of Lucas's absence, the pain that would never fully disappear, but he began to see that he could honor his son by moving forward, by allowing the love and care he still had to offer to flourish once more. Pain and love could coexist, and that was more than he had ever imagined possible. Olivia, ever attentive, never forced anything. She knew Nathan's path would not be easy, that with every step, he would have to confront his own shadows, insecurities, and fears. But she also knew he had the capacity within him to rise again. Gradually, she began to see him open up, not just to her but to the world around him. Nathan was reconnecting, not only with Ethan but with life itself. He started to understand that love doesn't run out, that he still had so much to give, and that, in some way, he was healing himself by helping others. As the farm transformed into a haven of solace and healing, Nathan felt a renewed connection to everything around him. The smell of wet earth, the sounds of animals, the calm rhythm of daily life, all of it seemed to invite him to reconnect with the essence of existence. He was no longer running from his feelings or fleeing his memories. He was letting the memories of Lucas guide him, but without letting them imprison him. Life, with all its pain and beauty, was unfolding before him, and Nathan was learning to embrace it, without fear, with courage, and with love. His relationships with Olivia and Ethan deepened each day. Through the unconditional support he received from them, Nathan began to realize how love, even in the darkest moments, could be profoundly healing. He was no longer alone in his pain but was sharing his joys and fears with those who, unknowingly, had helped him find his way back to life. The fear of losing himself again, of failing once more, lingered, but he no longer feared it the same way. He understood now that the true loss wasn't in trying and failing. It was in not trying, not allowing himself to be vulnerable, not letting himself love. Nathan's journey was far from a fairy tale. There were no guarantees, and he knew that. But as he looked at Ethan, he realized that what he was building now was something solid, something worthwhile. He understood that pain and loss would always be part of his story, but now he had a new reason to move forward. A renewed connection to life and to the future. Each step he took brought him closer to healing, making him see that everything he had been through wasn't in vain but part of something greater. His reconstruction wasn't just physical, it was a rebuilding of his soul. Over time, Nathan came to understand that the path back to life wasn't linear. It was a process of highs and lows, moments of doubt, and moments of clarity. But what he knew for certain was that he was no longer walking alone. He was surrounded by love, and that was enough to start believing that true healing happens when you allow yourself to live, to be part of something bigger than yourself. Nathan's transformation wasn't just physical or emotional, it extended to his very soul. Renewed and filled with a purpose he never thought possible, he realized that what began as an act of sacrifice for Ethan, the donation of his bone marrow, had grown into something much larger. He no longer saw himself as someone who helped out of obligation or compassion alone. He now viewed his pain and loss as part of a mission he finally understood. Nathan knew that everything he had endured was preparing him for something greater, to turn pain into action, fear into strength, and lost love into a reason to fight for something even more meaningful. He looked out at the farm, now flourishing not only with Ethan's recovery but with a newfound energy of healing and hope. Olivia, with her serene wisdom, had been the steadfast support who helped him see beyond his pain. Together, with Ethan's help, they began planning a future where they could assist more children and families facing battles similar to those Ethan and Lucas had fought. Nathan started to envision a future, not one of losses but one where he could offer help, be a force for good in the lives of others. The idea of founding a recovery center for children with rare diseases quickly took shape. The farm, once just a refuge, became a beacon of hope. Nathan knew that by creating this space, he wasn't just building something for others, he was building something for himself. Something that would restore not only his life but the lives of those seeking healing there. He wanted the Lucas Foundation to be a tribute to his son but also an opportunity to offer others the chance at a better life, one he now understood was precious and full of possibilities. Olivia, as always, was the steady hand guiding every step Nathan took. She not only believed in the project but supported it unconditionally. Her role wasn't just as a mentor but as a partner, someone who shared Nathan's vision and gave him the confidence to move forward. Together, they formed a team of committed professionals dedicated to transforming the pain of families into possibilities for healing. Nathan finally saw himself fulfilling the promise he had made to Lucas, to give his pain a purpose, to turn his experiences into something good. Nathan's path back to life was not easy, but he had found his mission. He was no longer trapped by guilt or fear of what the future might bring. He knew the fight wasn't over, but now he had something worth fighting for. The pain of losing Lucas remained, but it no longer imprisoned him. He had found a way to honor his son, to give his pain direction, to transform it into something positive. He was living his second chance in ways he never imagined. He was no longer a man lost in his suffering. He was a man with a mission, a purpose. Every child who arrived at the Lucas Foundation, every smile that emerged from the depths of suffering, was an immense reward for Nathan. He knew nothing could replace Lucas, but in a way, what he was doing now was a tribute to everything his son had represented in his life. The foundation grew quickly, becoming a place of refuge and hope where children received the care they needed and their families found the support to face their challenges. Nathan felt a peace he never thought possible. He was finally where he was meant to be, fulfilling a greater purpose and ensuring that Lucas's legacy lived on in every action he took. Olivia, witnessing Nathan's transformation, knew that what he had created wasn't just a foundation. It was a legacy of love, resilience, and overcoming pain. Nathan had been resurrected, not only in body but in spirit, with a renewed purpose and mission. He had become a living example that pain, no matter how immense, could be transformed into strength, and that with courage and love, life could be rebuilt in ways once thought impossible. The past hadn't been erased, but now it served something greater, something enduring. What began as an act of unconditional love, a decision to donate his bone marrow to save Ethan, had evolved into something much greater for Nathan. The Lucas Foundation, now thriving, wasn't just a place for physical healing. It was a haven for emotional and spiritual transformation. Every child who passed through its doors, every family that found support, was like a small flame lit in the darkness that had once consumed him. Surrounded by new challenges but also by new reasons to live, Nathan had found his purpose in a way he never imagined possible, and in doing so, he had found a peace that had eluded him for so long. Olivia, with her quiet smile and wise gaze, watched Nathan from afar without needing to say a word. She saw that he had completed his journey of self-overcoming and was now building a future for those who still needed a chance. The foundation was not just a tribute to Lucas but an extension of Nathan's own rebirth. Every child whose life he touched was a continuation of the love he had lost, now multiplied in ways he could never have foreseen. He had turned his pain, his loss, into a force stronger than any shadow that had once haunted him. Ethan, growing stronger and beginning to find his own identity, was the greatest testament to Nathan's journey. The boy had not only survived thanks to Nathan's sacrifice but, now healthy and with a life ahead of him, stood as living proof of love's transformative power. Nathan looked at him with immense gratitude for each day, each smile. The pain of Lucas's absence remained, but it was no longer a prison. It had become the flame that propelled Nathan forward, driving him to help, to build. He knew Lucas would always be a part of him, but in some way, his presence now felt gentler, more serene. By helping others, Nathan was keeping the love he shared with Lucas alive. Nathan's return to the world wasn't just a return to life, it was a reconnection with everything he thought he had lost: love, the people around him, and the ability to heal and be healed. The foundation had become more than a treatment center. It was a symbol of resilience and faith in life. With each step forward, Nathan felt a peace filling him, a peace that came from knowing he was no longer bound by his past. He had left behind guilt and fear, and now he lived according to the values he had rediscovered: love, sacrifice, and the belief that, even in pain, something beautiful can be created. The Lucas Foundation continued to grow, bringing hope and renewal to countless families who, like Nathan once was, were lost in grief and struggle. The legacy Nathan and Olivia were building was not just about physical healing but about personal and spiritual transformation. They were creating a community rooted in love, care, and the certainty that even in the darkest hours, there is always a light to guide us. For Nathan, this was more than a mission. It was the realization of a purpose he had never known he possessed. He was finally at peace with himself, his journey, and the life he was now building for himself and others. Olivia, watching Nathan and Ethan, understood that they had found something few ever do: true resurrection. Not in the physical sense but in how pain and love intertwine, creating a space where life can be lived fully despite it all. Nathan now knew, with absolute certainty, that the greatest elixir he could have discovered wasn't physical healing. It was the healing of his heart. He had found himself again, and in doing so, he had given the world one of the greatest gifts: the chance to live, to love, and to transform pain into something beautiful. When Nathan looked at the foundation, at the faces of the children being healed, at Ethan's bright smile, he understood that life didn't end with death. It began anew with every act of love we choose to offer. He had found his purpose, and now, surrounded by those he loved and those he had helped save, he knew that despite the losses, life always had something beautiful to offer. With every new child who came to the foundation, Nathan felt that Lucas was still present. Each smile, each step toward healing, was a reminder that pain, no matter how immense, could generate something positive, something greater than himself. Nathan had found his elixir not in medicine or physical healing but in the act of giving, of offering others the chance he hadn't been able to give his own son. And this was the gift he had discovered, the power to transform his pain into eternal love, the power to heal, to live, and to create something beautiful from what once seemed irreparable. Olivia, by Nathan's side, knew their mission didn't end there. There was still so much to do, so many lives to touch, so many hearts to heal. But the legacy they were creating was undeniable. The foundation had become a space of hope for so many people who, like Nathan once was, were lost in pain. Nathan had found the true essence of what it meant to live. It wasn't about escaping pain but using it as fuel to create something extraordinary. He had finally found his purpose, and with it, a peace he never thought possible. Ethan, now older and healthy, became the bridge between Nathan's past and future. The boy, who had once been a painful reminder of loss, was now a reflection of Nathan's recovery and rebirth. Their bond had grown into something profound and symbolic. When Nathan looked at Ethan, he saw a different, lighter, fuller version of the future he had envisioned for Lucas. He was no longer a man consumed by guilt and fear but someone who understood the value of living each moment fully and giving his best. Ethan's laughter, the way he played and enjoyed life, reminded Nathan that despite the losses, life still held beauty and meaning.